Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Sponsored by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Now let's explore the field of archaeology in today's episode.
Well, welcome to the program, people. This is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. Of course, my special guest is Dr. David Graves, PhD from Aberdeen University in Scotland. We got a really cool subject today. It is called the Jesus Boat, but it's also called the Galilean Boat. It was found in 1986. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually read some of the background about this boat, so you have this little bit of research that goes with it. Oh, you noticed my gloves. Okay. The reason for that is that there were artifacts found with the boat, which made it, you could say, easier to identify and timeline, give it a date. And we're going to look at some artifacts, and this is going to be a lot of fun. All right. So it was actually discovered in 1986 on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. The boat is actually 27 feet long, about 7.5 feet wide, and its maximum height is around 4 feet, it's 3 inches. It at first appeared during a severe drought. So, of course, the Sea of Galilee went down, and it's, you can say, the level of its water, and exposed this boat. All right. Now, the ancient boat is actually housed in a museum in a kibbutz, and a kibbutz is in a location in northern Galilee called Kibbutz Gennesar. The remains found of the boat were actually by two brothers from that kibbutz, Kibbutz Gennesar. They were themselves amateur archaeologists, but they actually contacted, because they knew its significance, they contacted the IAA, the Antiquity Authority, all right? And so they had a group of archaeologists, or I should say a team of archaeologists working at that site, along with some historians and members from the kibbutz, along with the Israel Antiquity Authority. So you can say 3 different groups, 3 different teams. The archaeologists, members of the kibbutz, because you need people to lift and move the mud that it was surrounded with, and also those that have the authority to okay the excavation, the Israel Antiquity Authority. Now, this is interesting because, David, there is actually a rumor at that time, there's always room for rumors, that the boat contained gold. So they actually had to have it guarded 24/7 for 12 days. Now, 12 days of 24-hour periods. So this is a long time and a lot of hard work. So actually they had crews there 24 hours. That means at nighttime it had to be lit up so they continue working. But understand that there's a rumor that it was filled with gold. So the boat had to be actually extracted inside the boat and outside the boat of mud. So with that in mind, and it took 12 days. Now understand that the wood of the boat is going to be, it's going to be fragile because it's waterlogged. So they had to do special treatment, special care. So they covered it with a mantle, first of all, of fiberglass to give it stability. And outside the fiberglass, they used insulation foam. Now, if nobody's ever used insulation foam, it's kind of like hardened cotton candy when you get done. You ever have cotton candy laying around that? You got kids and it lays in the bag for a while and it gets hard. You know, that's kind of what it's like. But it gave it enough stability, the fiberglass, to maintain the structure, and the insulation foam, so it could actually float. When they were able to release it from the mud, it could actually float on the water, so they could take it to the facility, the kibbutz North Gennesar. Now, artifacts that were found in the boat.
And John,
Okay, so yes.
the lady that developed this process, her name is Orrin Cohen, and she's worked with us on some of the archaeological sites. She developed that whole process to preserve the boat with the foam and everything. It took 4 years for them to get the boat preserved. 4
So
years
it's
they had to soak it.
Soak it in a solution. What was the solution of what? Like a resin or something? So
Yeah,
that
it was a resin that would pull the pull the moisture stuff. I've got PowerPoint here. I'll show you afterwards.
all right, that's cool. But we're going to look at artifacts. People like artifacts. So the artifacts that were found in the boat. First of all, they had nails. So I got a selection of nails right here for people to see. You know, you can say a nail is a nail. And these date from about the 1st century because they dated the boat to about 50 BC to around 50 AD or CE. So 100 years, within 100 years.
What do the heads of those nails look like? It'll be interesting for our audience to.
Well, you know, let me see if I can find something white. Like here's my paper right here. Now you can see what that looks like.
Yeah.
And another section of nails. This is what it looks like. You
Yeah.
can see it.
So they're square,
Also
not round.
fishing hooks. Yeah, fishing hooks. You can see what it looks like to the paper. Kind of like fishing hooks that we have today. Here's 2 of them. There, that's not good. It's kind of hard to get a grip on it with these gloves. But so they found nails and fishing hooks. Also a lamp, but this is a Herodian lamp.
Mhm.
But the lamp, David, that they actually found on the boat is called a Sabbath lamp. And it's different because on the Sabbath day, you know, if you filled your lamp, that was forbidden because that was work. So this outer part right here, you can see the circular part. It actually had a rim around it that was quite a bit higher, about that much higher. So it had an extra storage of olive oil, which they use for fuel. All right. And we're going to include pictures. So it was called the Sabbath lamp. That's what was found in the boat. What is this right here? It's a Herodian lamp. And it's not that Herod and his sons and his grandsons were making lamps. It's just the Herodian period.
Right.
So when we look at the lamps, it still was very, very similar to this Herodian lamp, except of the reservoir is much, much higher because it's a Sabbath lamp. I just thought that was interesting because that was in the boat. All right. Third thing is arrowheads. Now, once again, I'll have to show you this compared to the paper. Now, these are Roman arrowheads. This does make it difficult. But anyway, an arrowhead's an arrowhead, pretty much. Let's see if I can do it like this. There, okay? An arrowhead.
I'll try and do
Yeah,
some
we could
blow-ups
probably
of
find
those
we can find some arrowheads that,
photos.
on the internet and show those as well. Roman period arrowheads. But this is interesting because not all of the articles that referred to the artifacts found on the boat, in the boat, mentioned arrowheads. And I thought that was unusual because if there's arrowheads, it might be evidence of the first Jewish revolt where the Romans laid siege to the cities around a town called Migdol. Now we know Migdol in the New Testament because Mary of Magdala. Many people think that's her last name, like my name is George Sparks or David Graves. No, she's identified with the location from where she was from. Mary of Magdala, and Migdal in Hebrew actually means tower. So it seems like it's identifying with a harbor, which makes sense because the way the Jewish population left the west side of the Sea of Galilee, trying to flee the Roman army that was heading their way, is they got on boats and sailed out, rowed out to the Sea of Galilee, out as far as they could go. However, the Romans followed them, and according to Josephus, he uses pretty much the word, it was a slaughter. And the fact that they found arrowheads, now I'm going to say found arrowheads, because for some reason, not all articles label these among what was excavated. Now, David, you know the big difference between an excavation and a found. Excavation could be in situ. All these items found in situ, but maybe not the arrowheads. And we can just suppose maybe the reason for this is that we had teams. We had the archaeologist and we had the people from the kibbutz, and the Israel Antiquity Society was there. But now, generally, people from the kibbutz might not be archaeologists, and they were there to help move buckets because they're in a hurry. Could it be that these were removed from the location and we're not sure? So they were found, but they were not excavated in situ. Does that make sense for the listening
Yeah,
audience?
in location,
Yeah. So maybe that's why they're not
in
listed
place.
among excavated items. But the fact that in some articles they were found might be evidence that this boat was one that fell during that Roman siege of the cities around Magdala. Okay. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4 items. The fifth item that we're going to talk about is cooking pots. Now, I didn't have enough room here to handle the cooking pots. I got to give them some room because there's different styles of cooking pots, and there's a certain selection, a certain in type style that was found in the boat. All right, and we're gonna look at that first. Okay. Now, this is a particular style of cooking pot. Now, there is no way, that there's a patent on making cooking pots in the ancient world. Whatever works best for a cooking pot. Now, it could be at one time, this particular, you can see the bottom of it and its gyrations of how it was made on the potter's wheel. Typically a Herodian style, Roman period style that continues into the Byzantine period. Very, very similar. And this curvature right here that we have below the handle. Okay, so we got the rim. If it goes inside, then we call it inverted. If it goes outside, we call it everted. So this is an everted rim. And the handle begins at the rim and it goes down to what we might call the shoulder of the vessel. But the fact that this has a sharp turn, we could call this a carination. A cooking pot with a carination. We see this a lot during the Middle Bronze Age artifacts. I don't want to get off subject, but we're learning some different archaeological terms and how we describe pottery.
And the people that use them usually were extroverts.
Okay, but that's interesting. We call it like inverted and then everted. Why is it everted? Do you think it's outverted? But let's look at some other cooking pots from that period. I gotta be careful, man. I don't want to bust these. These are 2,000 years old. Extremely rare. Check this one out from the museum.
Oh, that's in good shape.
Bottom, very similar. Handles are different. Remember, the other handles were actually, you could say, like they were like a vertical.
Right.
These are horizontal.
Horizontal, yeah.
But the style of the handle is still the same. It's just horizontal. But what's unique about this vessel right here?
I excavated a couple of those at Tel El Hammam in the Roman area.
But did you get the lid?
Yeah, we did have some lids, but not
Wow.
not a complete one. They were broken.
Look at this lid though. Isn't this cool? Isn't it cool? Look at how perfect this is.
Excellent.
That means the lid has to be made to fit the vessel. So this is a complete cook, and be still listed as a cooking pot, but a different style. Casserole dish. Okay, but then usually, but when we talk about cooking pots, I'm going to show you a third style, and by far the most common.
Right. Yeah, we've
Once
got
again, the
lots
bottom,
of those samples.
very, very similar. Once again, the handles again,
yeah,
are vertical. Notice that it doesn't have a carination to it. It's round.
Right.
Out of if somebody was going to say, I found a Roman cooking pot, then this was the type that would come to mind. All right.
Yeah, we've
So
got
I'm
lots
showing
of
you
samples of those rims and handles from our site. Yeah.
because I think two of the most common types of artifacts would be your cooking pots. You got to eat and you got to see. So a lamp. These are very, very common. And it's one of the easiest ways to identify the time period of which you're excavating as well.
Yeah. We also had lots of crack pots around too.
Oh, funny guy here today, a crackpot. And I appreciate the humor, I do. But, here at the museum, we try to avoid cracking any pots. We want them intact.
That's right.
So to the listening audience, once again, 3 cooking pots, different styles of cooking pots within the last half of the 1st and 2nd century BC AD. Very similar, the other 2, to what was found in, I'm just going to call it the Jesus boat or the Galilean boat, which you can see when it becomes available again at kibbutz North Gennesaar. Now, why is it north? Because it's north of the Sea of Galilee. All right. I go back. I don't want to confuse people, but we could list it again if that's fine. Number 1, we found the nails, excavated the nails, excavated the fish hooks. Once again, excavated for sure. An oil lamp. Once again, the one they found was a Sabbath lamp. This is just a plain Herodian lamp. They also excavated cooking pots. What does that mean by using excavated? These were found in situ. What possibly wasn't found in situ, once again, was I see that, arrowheads. But these were the items that were found inside or around the Jesus boat that was located by 2 brothers on, you could say, the northern shores, pretty much, of the Sea of Galilee, probably northwest shores of the Sea of Galilee, by 2 brothers from the kibbutz North Gennesaar. David, what do you want to add to this, sir?
Well, it's also called sometimes the Kinneret Boat because it was found at Lake Kinneret, which is the ancient name for the Sea of Galilee. And the other thing to point out to our listener is that there's no evidence at all that Jesus was actually in that boat. They call it the Jesus boat because it was one from the 1st century. The style of the type of boat that the fishermen would have used to fish on the Sea of Galilee. It has been referred to as the Jesus boat simply because it was from that time period and one that would be a sample of that. But we don't have any actual evidence that Jesus actually sat in that specific boat. One very much like it, probably, and that's why it's been named and dubbed the Jesus boat.
Thanks for bringing it out. It was in my notes, but I failed to mention
Yeah.
that. And we don't want to mislead people by saying just because it was dubbed the Jesus boat. And I think one of the reasons why they did that is because what would draw more people, the
Oh, yeah.
Galilee boat or the Jesus boat? Of course, the Jesus boat.
And of
And
course, for a podcast, we call it the Jesus boat as well. And advertising
absolutely,
is good
it is what it is. Right.
catch
It is
people's
what it is.
attention and draw them in. But what's really, really neat is that we have a boat from one of the only surviving boats from the 1st century that we have intact. And I'll show some photographs of it here, the reproduction of it, how really cool it was. The other thing that I found fascinating is that there was a lot of different types of wood that were used in it, not just one kind of hardwood or pine or whatever. There was a whole lot of different kinds of wood. There's quite a few. I'll pull my PowerPoint up there now if you want. I'll
Sure.
show a few photographs. So this is going to repeat a little bit of what you said earlier, but we'll give everyone a little bit of an idea. That's kind of the image AI is put together, and it's pretty accurate to the style of boat that was used based on the archaeological evidence. So there's the boat itself, call it the Kinneret Boat or the Jesus boat, found up here in Galilee, kibbutz, as you mentioned. There are 45 references to boats and fishing in the gospel, so it's very significant. They did a lot of fishing in the 1st century, and the Sea of Galilee was full of really good fish. And of course, it dropped to record lows, as you mentioned. Motor and tension joints as well indicated that the boat was ancient. So not a lot of nails used to put the thing together. They used mortise and tenon. Dates to around 120 BC to about 40 AD. That's carbon dating. And that would usually hold 5 to 12 adults, according to Josephus. So a lot of different types of woods. So obviously some of it was repurposed. They might have seen an old vessel lying around and they pulled some of the wood off of it to incorporate it into this boat. And there's Orna Cohen.
Is she still alive?
Yes, she is. Yeah, she is
Okay.
still alive and still working with the IAA. This is a clip I had taken from a YouTube video she had posted describing it in Hebrew, how she did it. So she developed the process, wrapped the vessel in fiberglass and polyurethane, as you had mentioned. Then she lowered it into a concrete tank filled with water and polyethylene glycol, and she let it sit there for a few years until it pulled all the impurities out of it. The theory of the procedure was the water would eventually become replaced with the glycol and preserve the wood. It took 11 years before the wood stabilized and then was finally placed on display. So it took a long time for her to go through this elongated process to preserve the wood and to put it on display. And it gives us an idea of what a vessel looks like from the New Testament period. Here's a drawing of it, the style of a vessel that they had. And we have a few examples from Migdal mosaic. This one right here, beautiful mosaic of what they look like. 3 oars, curved bow on it. We have an example from some graffiti and also from some coins. And here's the model of it they have on display at the Sea of Galilee that you can see it today, how it would have looked like. So pretty sturdy vessel. And these are the ones that were common in the 1st century AD. That's my little bit of an intro to the Jesus boat. And you had the artifacts to show, which was really cool. I think a pretty interesting podcast today for us.
I think it covered a lot of bases, and it was my privilege to get these artifacts from the museum vault and share it with the listening audience. You didn't mention a mosaic, and you gave a great picture of it from Migdal. So Mary of Magdala, the Migdal mosaic, and I did pull one of these things. It's common, but from the museum as well, just to give people an idea of a
Mosaic.
fragment of a mosaic. Now, of course, it's only white cubes, but this is, now you can compare it to my hand so you can see how big these cubes are during this 1st century BC and AD period. Very
And
common.
the technical term for them are tessera.
Oh,
That's
just
what
like
the cubes are.
the tessera cube. But usually when they did mosaics, I don't know about this one with the boat on it, but they'd actually lay down plaster and then they would draw on it the item that they were going to actually cover later on with the little tesseras, these little cubes. So they actually have a picture, some artwork, and then they covered it with the cube. So there was a lot of work to making a mosaic, and they can be, as you know, quite elaborate. But
and depending on the different time periods, I'll show some photographs of them. They have some really small, tiny ones, and then they have in the Byzantine period, they got quite a bit larger. And the pictures could be made out of the small ones or the larger ones. You can usually tell which period by the size of the tessera. I've got some from a mosaic, or a photograph of it, of a beautiful chalice from a church in Jordan. Probably one of the only Westerners that has seen it, has published it. And it's pretty cool. I've got a couple little small tessera from it that had broken away. Wow. So yeah. And they're red and yellow and blue, beautiful colors. They would take the stone, they would cut it like you would take they had clippers, something like we would have for fingernail clippers. They're a little bigger than that. And they would chip these cubes, this rock, and form it into these tessera. And how they did cut them to size and make these beautiful pictures. Jordan's famous for the mosaics, especially the place called Madaba, where the Madaba map is located as well. So good, you've got a nice sample of a tessera there, the white ones. And
well, I just want to do a close up of it,
yeah, beautiful.
You can see how it's sitting in the plaster as well.
And today, for restoration, what they do is they cut the pictures up into pieces and they relocate them, melt them in museums. And in fact, one of the famous ones today is on display. They're taking it around the world, showing it at different museums. It's the famous Megiddo prison.
The Megiddo prison, yes. I thought it's that museum that's up there in Washington right now that has it on display. Another famous mosaic that you're talking about is the Mona Lisa of Galilee, Zapori. And when they first started excavating it on the outer peripheral, of course, it's thousands and thousands of these little tesseras. On the outside of it, they were just scooping up, to begin with, just scooping up all these that broken loose. I had a few of those too, from the outer edges of the Mona Lisa of Galilee, which is pretty cool, I thought.
Yeah.
It came from one of the excavators that knew Harold and Eric Myers. They were the chief archaeologist at that location. But I don't want to, that has to do with mosaics. I don't want to get off subject. But if you want to, and you want to look at the different types of mosaics, then here's all these different references that we just gave you. And so interesting podcast today, I do say. and about the boat from Galilee, or the Jesus boat, now on display at Kibbutz North Yonosar, and the number of artifacts that were found in the boat. I should say excavated once again in situ in the boat, and possibly artifacts that were found but not necessarily recorded, so we couldn't say that they're technically, as archaeologists say, in situ. We also gave different varieties of cooking pots and described in archaeological terms the rim being inverted or everted, the different types of handles being either vertical or horizontal, and the curvature of the pottery. Do you remember what it's called? Carination. When it's curved like that, it's called carination. So, fun day. We shared quite a bit there, David.
Yep.
And I thank you very
If-
much once again for your PowerPoint. So then they have, a good view of what we're talking about of the excavation in the boat itself. Everybody out
Right.
there, thank you for joining us. I think right now we are at 196,000 subscribers. So we're really, really close. Next time we meet, we might be over 200,000. Who knows? But the important part is the archaeology that we love to share with you people, and also bringing in these artifacts from the vaults. So once again, some of this might be actually on the short podcast where we're actually going into the vaults. Explorers, is that Explorers of the Lost Vaults. So stay tuned, stay with us on this. We're going to get more artifacts and talk about more archaeological finds. Thank you for your time and your support. My name is Dr. George Sparks, and also Dr. David Graves. Everybody have a great day.
Have a good day.